Welcome to episode 17 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary, with Kristen
and Catherine, where we believe there is nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club, where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hey, Kristen.
Hi, Catherine. So I guess today we are asking the age-old question, and it might be obvious for our listeners what we do. But, Catherine, do you reread books? And if so, do you have any particular favorites?
No, I don't reread at all. Yeah, this one I guess is a bit obvious, but yeah, of course I do reread books all the time. Like as a kid, I remember I reread Harry Potter, must have been 20 or 30 times. Like anytime I'd want to read a book, it was the only one I wanted to read. Obviously, as an adult, I've expanded my books, but I do still loving. I do still love to go back and read certain books like Pride and Prejudice. I'll generally reread it once a year. But even if I'm in a reading slump or just want something familiar, I'll pick up an old favorite. I like rereads because I know in general what's going to happen, but you also get to like do the deeper dive into the story and find breadcrumbs and more information that you might have missed the first time. So yeah, I love rereads. What about you?
Yeah, I'm the same. I love to reread. For me, it's sometimes it's just easier for me to do a reread rather than getting emotionally involved in a new book. Like, books that I've read before that I know what happens. I know that the outcome is something that I enjoy. So, you know, I I am a reader. I don't know if I'm unusual in my taste in that I enjoy happy endings. It's part of the reason why I actually like the romance sort of genre as much as I do, because they are happy ending forward, right? Like that's the that's romance books. They have to have a happy ending.
That's what
So
they sell.
that is what they sell. So that's why I like them so much. So I really like happy endings, and I like when my sort of OTP gets together and has like a happy life. So uh, I just like knowing what's going to happen rather than getting emotionally involved in a new book.
Yeah, no, completely makes sense.
I tend to go for A Court of Mist and Fury by Sarah J. Maas a lot. Again, because I know what happens, and even knowing the ending is a little bit not happy, I can skip that.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice is another one that I really like to reread. And then sometimes I'll go pick up some Nora Roberts when I feel the urge, like when I'm just feeling for something that is like sappy and romantic and happy all the time.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you just want the act of reading. Like sometimes you just want to read something, but you don't want the emotional hazards of like a brand new book.
So just a heads up, we're not a spoiler-free zone and things might get a little saucy. So this week is our last week of Bitten, and we are doing chapters 24 to 34, which is chapter settling until the end of the book. So last week, we ended with Elena getting a scare in the form of Thomas LeBlanc actually trying to kill her, which is not expected for Mutz because she is precious and special. Then,
of course she is.
Tropey trope. But like, I don't mind it as much in this book as I do in some other books, to be honest.
That's true. Yeah.
Then Jeremy told her she and Clay were going to stay with Phillip in Toronto for her protection from the bad guys, right? But not from the emotional turmoil of her entire book saga of werewolf versus human life. Like her and her ex-fiance, current sleeping partner, are going to stay with her boyfriend, who she continuously forgets about.
And can you imagine literally having to sleep in an apartment, and not a large one, like a 1-bedroom apartment, with your current boyfriend and your ex-fiance that you are currently sleeping with?
No.
Like, heck awkward.
I would refuse. Like, I get that Jeremy's like, you have to, and then Clay gets on board with the plan, and then like she's just like, I guess I'm the odd man out, gotta go do it. I would just be like, I'm sorry, I'm changing my name and I'm gonna move to friggin' Europe and no one's gonna find me there. Are the mutts gonna come to Europe and get me?
Do you know what's bad? When you just said I'm going to change my name and move, my thought process automatically filled in the blanks with to Canada.
Oh.
Except they're already going to Canada.
Yes. So my brain went to Mexico and I was like, that's still too close. So then I said Europe. But yeah. Yeah. So basically at the very, very end of last week, it kind of ends with Elena going to bed with Phillip and feeling like it's going to be a catastrophe.
Yes.
And you're like, yes, it is. But Elena wakes up to the smell of bacon and French toast, which sounds like a glorious way to wake up.
I know. My gosh, I would love that. Yes,
exactly.
Please.
Yeah. So, of course, she assumes that it's Phillip and that he like stayed late because she's been gone for a while and wanted to give her breakfast and stuff. But obviously it's Clay. Like,
yeah,
everybody reading it knew it was Clay. They didn't need to be told otherwise. Phillip did send her flowers, though, a dozen red roses.
Can I just be honest, though, and say that, like, if I was gone for, like, a couple of weeks and I show up, like, the evening, and then my husband was like, okay, I'm going to get up super early and, like, see ya, bye.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be kind of like, dude, really?
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, 100%. Well, at least wake me up before you go. Although
Right,
I wouldn't sleep through someone getting out of bed with me. Like, that's not something that I can do.
I don't think. No, I agree there.
Yeah. I'd be like, kiss me and tell me you love me before you leave.
Wake me up before you go.
Yeah, that's the one. I have, so Elena takes the flowers and she's gonna just bring them into her room. And Clay's like, you need water and you need sunlight. And she's like, ah, shit. Like, she's completely clueless, which like is kind of another trope, but I actually kind of like, I believe it in this case. It's not
Yeah.
too tropey. It's kind of like, yeah, she probably didn't have much use for flowers in her growing up life. And she mentions that she's much better at killing things than keeping them alive. And she kind of says that like in relation to plans. And she also says here that it's a good thing she never planned to have kids, which kind of clears up a chat that we had a couple weeks ago, I think, about losing the life that she wanted. So we talked about like she got turned and now she can't have kids and that she was upset about that. But she does mention here that she never wanted them. So that seems like something that was before she was even turned. So it's kind of contradictory to some of the stuff we heard. And obviously people are complex, but just something to point out.
Well, I guess she's probably more pissed at losing the option than she is at actually like,
yes,
oh, I wanted kids. No, she wanted just the option open to her if it ever, came to.
Yeah. So I guess Elena and Clay are stuck together during the day because Clay is there to protect her. But Elena's a bit mean to Clay during the day. Like, they go to her work on the subway, which she knows he absolutely despises because
it's crowded.
Yeah, he's a wolf by nature. He wants to be in open spaces. He doesn't want to be near people. He despises people. But he does everything he needs to do because it's on Jeremy's orders and he's trying to protect her. She does tell him that he can't stay outside of her office, but like, where did she expect him to go? Like, he's there to protect her. What did she want him to do? Not protect her? Like, I don't really think that was really thought through. We also get a bit of information on, like, I guess the psychic connection between the alpha and the wolves. So Jeremy can contact Elena psychically, and apparently most of the werewolves kind of ignore it. And this is, in my opinion, just kind of another sign of how advanced and kind of alpha Elena is. Like, she really is good at thinking like a werewolf. That's like, she's very good at knowing the patterns that the wolves would know to hunt, and she's very good at like different things that other wolves ignore because their human sides kind of stop them from exploring it, which is kind of funny because she's like the big one having the battle between human and werewolf, but she's also very in tune with her werewolf side, which you wouldn't necessarily expect. But Jeremy can only kind of like speak to them in their dreams, which is kind of like Vampire Academy, I was thinking, but definitely interesting. So the second day that Clay is staying with her, she kind of starts to take Clay feeding her for granted. And she's like, if I just stay in bed, he'll just bring it in here. And it's like, it'd be weird if Clay brought food and coffee into the bedroom that you share with another man. Like, even if the man is not home, that would be a weird situation for him to be in just because you're too lazy to get out of bed. Like, that's a bit...
I mean, considering all the stuff they have done behind Phillip's back,
Yeah.
anyway, I don't think him giving her breakfast in her room that she shares with him, if he is not there,
Yes.
I don't consider that as big like a huge deal. But also, like, I think we failed to mention, or maybe we did last week, that the story is that Clay and Elena are
Yes.
cousins.
Yeah.
So
no funny business.
Yeah. But like, they're just so natural with each other. Like, I feel like Phillip has to be an idiot.
Well, let's get a bit further into this week and see. But
yes.
So yeah, she's expecting basically Clay to come into the room with her food, and then she hears Phillip talking and she's like, what the fuck? So she rushes out, and I guess Phillip is like not immediately in the room because she's like, Clay, you have to put a normal amount of food for like a normal amount of people, and then he already had that. So
yeah,
she just expected him to not act normal in front of Phillip, try to make it weird or something. But he's completely not. He's like being a perfect gentleman, and other than like not really talking much to Phillip, which like is rude, but you can't really blame him after what the situation is like. So she has to go to work, obviously, but she agrees to lunch with Clay. And at lunchtime, they meet up and he brings her to the University of Toronto. And she almost refuses to go because it's where they actually fell in love. But she doesn't want to kind of give him the satisfaction of not doing something because of feelings. We get another flashback here, which is not surprising. And she admits that she told him more than she's ever told anyone else. She wanted him to know her and love her regardless of like her past, even though her past was not her fault. But she does just mention that like she opened herself up so much to him. And I guess the fact that she didn't know as much about him, because obviously he had to lie about his childhood. He was turned at such a young age and he was keeping all that a secret. So that kind of hurts her in a way that like she thought that he was open with her and that he was being truthful, but he had to admit so much about his childhood that she feels like that is more of a betrayal than him actually biting her, which is a wild thing to say because she clearly took being bitten very badly. So I don't know. Yeah, it's a lot.
But like, I guess the only thing I can think of is like maybe this is her epiphany moment. Like maybe this is her like oh, wow, maybe I wasn't actually pissed that he bit me all these years. Maybe it was the lying
Yeah, the not
part.
knowing him and giving so much of myself thinking, yeah, yeah, and that could be it too, yeah. So obviously there's kind of a lot happening with the three of them living in this very tiny home, apartment, condo. And Phillip is kind of starting to notice that Elena is acting different than normal. So she's more, I'll say, aggressive and snappy at Clay than Phillip has ever seen her. And that's not a side that he's ever noticed. So anyway, he just knows that it's weird. And I think she's also happier than he's ever seen her with Clay as well. So it's like her emotions are higher on both sides than he's ever seen. And I think he's kind of starting to realize that something is up. So Phillip, asks her out to dinner alone. And it's kind of, I guess, like a date. They go to dinner and then they're thinking maybe we'll go to the theater. But Elena talks about how awkward it is. It's like she forgot how to act around him, and it's just very weird. But he does mention that, like, he might be in his head too much, but he feels like he's left out, and he doesn't really know how to, I guess, act around the two of them. Like, I feel like he could have had this conversation better, but he can obviously feel that there's something going on, not necessarily romantically between them, because he still thinks that they're cousins. But he can tell that they have a bond, and he feels like a third wheel. And like, I definitely feel like the conversation could have gone better than it did, but I do understand how awkward it must be to be him and be like, am I reading this wrong? Am I just crazy? Like, they're cousins.
Well, I guess that's it, right? Like, they are supposed to be cousins, so I guess maybe he's looking at it as they're being very flirtatious and, like, sort of lovey, but that's not right because they're cousins,
Yeah.
right? So he's definitely, I think, doubting himself because of that, but at the same time, there's no way he doesn't notice
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
them together, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna say they're effortless, right? Like,
Yes.
she tries so hard with Phillip to be steady, even keeled. She can't eat as much at once. She can't show how strong she is. She has to pace herself all the time. She can't show her wide range of emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But with Clay, it is like it's it's effortless for her to be with him. She can be her true self and doesn't have to watch what she says all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly it. And then it's even more shown. And I think one of the next scenes, you get a kind of a view of Elena and Clay's day together, and they go to like Chinatown, and they're just walking around, and they're like people watching and laughing and like having fun. And it's obvious that she enjoys her time more with him than she is with Phillip right now. So it was just a juxtaposition of their days.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and
Elaine,
I just like the way that I imagine it is I imagine, like, say if you're somebody who likes pizza, beer, and cheap movies,
me,
right? Well, but all of us. Who
yes,
are we kidding?
that's why we're friends.
Yeah. But you meet somebody and they're great, but they like museums and they like fancy dinners and they like those poignant films that always get voted for at the Oscars,
Yeah. I think
right? Like the
other
artsy.
than those films, although some of the films we like are also those, but I'm like, we're also
I
that
know.
too. People are too
I know.
complex to put into these boxes.
But I guess in my head, the way I feel she is pizza, beer, and
Hmm.
like and Marvel movies.
Yeah.
And while she can function in museums and like artsy fartsy places
Hmm.
and like business dinners and all that jazz, she can do it, but she's not really
She's putting on
enjoying it.
she's putting on an act almost.
Yeah. So, like, it's obvious that we see that with Phillip, she's doing the act, whereas with Clay, she's genuinely just enjoying herself.
Yeah, for sure. So obviously because of this, Elena, and because of their go date, Elena is feeling the tension with Phillip, and she's kind of taking it out on Clay, which isn't surprising at all because that's how she rolls. She knows Clay's gonna always be there, so she's kind of like not the nicest to him. So Phillip was going to meet her for lunch, but he messages to say he can't make lunch because he's golfing.
Ugh.
Yeah, which is also another thing that I think that she's just not. And there's
No.
even like a good, I think, scene in this part where it kind of shows the difference between them, which, like, you don't need to have every single extracurricular activity / hobby in your life be the same as your significant other. But
No.
he golfs every weekend, at least once, maybe twice. And she said that she went with him once, and she was just like, there's too many rules for her because you needed to make, like, what you wore was dictated, and like you couldn't have short sleeves, I think is one thing that she said. And it just obviously isn't something that she is good with because she's not good with rules in general. So it definitely does show her personality a bit more, but like their hobbies, especially if it's a hobby you're going to do every weekend, maybe should have a bit more compatibility. And like Phillip works
a lot.
Like, it's obviously over 40 hours a week. It's not a regular job. He's like got night meetings and he's got overnight things. So like it's clear they like, do they spend time together? I don't really know.
Yeah.
So Phillip sends her flowers again to apologize because he's basically gone all day. And then he says he has a meeting in Montreal. So he's got to take a train to Montreal that afternoon. So he's there for the next morning. So he's not coming home until sometime the next day, basically. And when she gets these flowers, I think she feels a bit embarrassed and defensive about Phillip. And she kind of like, Clay's obviously there. She's kind of like, see, he's so thoughtful. He brought these flowers. And like, she even is like, what, like, she asks him, I know you want to say something. Like, what do you want to say? And he's like, no, I don't have anything to say. And then she was like, well, I think she point blank asks Clay what he thinks of Phillip. And Clay says that Phillip's a decent guy. He's good and patient and caring. And doesn't that remind Elena of someone? And Elena's like, clearly not you. And he's like, not talking about me, darling, because he says darling.
Yeah.
But yeah, she doesn't understand it at this point, and like we'll figure out who he's talking about a bit later. But it's just an interesting.
We
connection.
all know.
Yeah,
we all know who it is.
Yeah, but she cannot grasp it, which is just kind of funny. But I think she needs to go through that process to figure out everything in the end. So because Phillip's gone for the night, Elena and Clay decide to go for a run. They decide to walk to the ravine, and that obviously takes a while, but they have the whole night, so it's fine. Then they go their separate ways to kind of change, and Elena is kind of like struck by how natural she feels changing, because she's never felt this natural in Toronto before. She like is always trying to keep her good side out as a human, but it's obviously unnatural to her and it's hard to keep up. And she says like maybe the key to balance is to let more of her personality, which is like confrontational, sarcastic, like more of that side of her personality out, and stop trying to repress it. And like maybe it's okay to be not a good human all the time.
Well, I think she also says too that like I think she likened those characteristics that she didn't like about herself, like her confrontationalness and her sort of her sauciness, you know, the aggressiveness. She associates them with her wolf, but she's sort of coming to the realization that those bits were always there. Like, she always had those traits.
Yeah.
It wasn't just her becoming a werewolf that made these things happen to her. She was always that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's nice seeing her start to really embrace who she is as a person.
Yeah. Completely agree. So after the run, they just lay naked, of course, in the clearing. And Elena mentions that their blood is so hot they could have been in a snowbank and not noticed. So that kind of clears up the whole freezing after a run and sleeping outside thing, because we did kind of wonder about that a few weeks ago too.
Yeah.
So they just kind of lie there and talk. And once they're like rested properly, Clay produces some sparklers and says that it's a fireworks weekend up here. All I can think of is Canada Day, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know of any other Canadian holiday where you would do fireworks. Like,
New Year's, but it's not New Year's.
no.
Anyway, not sure, but
We'll
so
say Canada Day.
yeah. So this is kind of a part that I kind of think wouldn't necessarily be written like this if the book was newer. But Elena kind of talks about how she loves sparklers a lot. And she says that for a 30-year-old, like, it's not something that is okay. And like, I feel like kind of in the world that we're in now, it's okay for 30-year-olds to be obsessed with silly things. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it might have been written differently if it was done now than it was then. But
Yeah. But we also have to think that, like, she was deprived so intensely of a childhood, like being sexually abused and like given from home to home to home, that I'm sure she never got to experience sparklers and waving them around and stuff like that.
yeah,
So,
not as
you
much as she
know,
should have. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
So she does mention that the reason she likes them so much is because it's one of the only things she remembers about her parents is, I guess, the Canada probably before they died and her first ever sparkler. So it's definitely also something that like keeps her closer to her parents as much as she can be.
Mhm.
She also mentions that she doesn't mind Clay seeing how much she loves sparklers because he doesn't understand human things anyway, and he wouldn't know to kind of like make fun of her for liking something like that.
Can I just say though, who doesn't like a sparkler?
I know.
Like, even as an adult, yes, I will happily wave a sparkler around and write things in the sky 100,000,000%.
Yeah, I know.
So, like, I get that maybe she's a little like, oh, I don't want to admit how much I love them, but like, who the fuck cares?
Yeah. And I guess the other thing too is like she's keeping this like perfect persona on for Phillip, and Phillip doesn't know anything about her childhood or her past, and like he doesn't know that she loves them because she is like a grown woman who is a professional, I guess, is kind of like what she's putting out. So I can see why she kind of feels that way, but I think all people love sparklers.
If you don't love sparklers, you don't know what you're missing.
Yes, go buy one and you'll love it.
Yeah.
So Elena takes the first sparkler and she kind of writes with it. Before it's kind of like gone out, there's a bit of cute banter between her and Clay. And Clay's just like, it's almost out, throw it and make a wish. And she's like, that's for birthday candles. You don't throw sparklers. And he says, you did throw the birthday candles once, cake and all. And like, it's a cute thing about, not cute, but it's cute banter. And it's kind of a thing
Yeah.
about their past. Like, obviously they have a lot going on, but I kind of liked it. It was very cute.
Yeah.
He tells her she may as well make it a new werewolf superstition. So that one's out. She throws it, and Elena gets the next sparkler, and she's twirling. She almost falls, but Clay kind of like steadies her, and he tells her that he loves her. And I think in this scene she almost says it back, but she kind of freezes, and she won't let the words out, obviously. But he tells her it's not a trick, and he's not trying to romance her. He just wants to kind of like ease off so she can make the right choice for her. And like, I think that is so impressive and like mature in a way that we were told that he is not. And like maybe he's
Yeah.
kind of like figuring it out now that he has to like give her the room and space to do it. But if I were him, I would have been like, fuck you, fuck Phillip, I'm out. Like,
Yeah.
anyway.
I also think that, again, we're getting it from Elena's point of view. So I feel like a lot of her identity has been about villainizing Clay.
Yeah.
So and like realistically, we didn't get a whole lot of time seeing them together, not in like stressful situations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like she went back to Stonehaven and, oh, there's a problem. And like, then, oh, there's a murder. Oh, there's another murder. Like
Yeah.
people are getting hurt. So like, they're not like, they're not spending time together in a way that's not like life or death.
Yes.
So I feel like finally now seeing them behave like a typical couple would behave, we're finally getting the real Clay, and sort of it's like well, he's actually not a terrible person.
Yes. Yeah. And I do think that like he's probably grown a lot over these years, and Elena's not giving him credit for it because obviously everybody grows. This has been a bunch of years. Like it's not like he's not going to grow as a person in that time. So she's obviously very confused over what choice she should make, as she has been the entire book. And she throws the sparkler and she makes a wish, and she wishes she knew what she wanted. So then they sleep in the forest, which I guess is completely normal for them. And then they walk back and get breakfast in downtown Toronto. And sitting there eating breakfast, Elena is like truly happy. So they go back to the apartment, and Elena is going to be late for work, but she doesn't really care. And then they open the door, and Phillip is sitting there, kind of like an overprotective dad. Elena is like already trying to think of excuses as she walks into the door. And Phillip is like, I need to talk to Elena. And Clay like goes to like walk into the shower, which is his go-to lately. But Phillip's like, no, get the fuck out. He doesn't swear, but he's like, no, I need to talk to her alone. Please leave. And Clay leaves. He just goes downstairs. But Phillip reveals that he lied, which is, I was kind of impressed with him at this point. Like, I didn't think he had it in him, to be honest.
I wasn't a fan of this move.
No, I think they could have had a conversation about it. It could have gone better. But like, Elena also was lying. There was no good move here.
No, you're right. I feel bad for him, but I also like, I don't think deceiving her when she had just like a lovely evening and like finally realized some shit about herself, and like, we genuinely see her happy, and then he's like, psych, that was all a ruse.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just think it's like, it's manipulative to me.
Yes, but I also think that it helps push her into the right direction in the end. But yeah. So he didn't have a meeting. He stayed, and I'm like, in that chair all night. Like, so he basically just stayed there waiting for them. And he did think that they were screwing. But he's like, you wouldn't have to leave for that. So clearly it's not that. But he does say that he knows that Clay is in love with her, which is obvious. Like,
but also cousins.
So Phillip wants Clay gone today. And Elena's like, yeah, he won't be here much longer. And he's like, nope, I need him gone now. He also reveals he didn't even go golfing. He went to look at houses.
But like, who goes to look at houses by themselves when they are shopping for them and their spouse?
Right? Also, if you've barely talked about buying a house together, like I thought they talked about maybe getting a condo together when their lease was up. But he's like, we're going to sublet this place and we're going to buy a fucking house. And she's like, what? Like, So he wants to buy a house, and to him, I will underline with my voice, that means marriage and kids and everything. Also his words. And I'm like, okay, cool. Like, I get it. Buying a house is a big deal. And I do, in my head, I'm like, buying a house is a huge commitment. And if I'm going to do that with somebody, then yes, it does, it does mean a lot. But you can't just say that and that be your proposal. Because he's literally in his next line, he's like, go to work and think about it. He doesn't need the answer now, but he'll get her a ring and do it right. And it's like, you just basically proposed, and that in a moment of anger, basically, that she didn't come home. And that's your proposal? I don't like it.
Yeah. No. I don't like it either. And this is coming from me, and I started planning my wedding before I got a proposal.
Yes, but I don't know, like, they clearly have so much going on in their relationship. Like, he's like, you need to stop leaving at night. Like, you think more lies is going to fix this? Just seems a bit much. Um so she leaves to go to work, but she's like kind of excited about the, in my words, not proposal. Possibly a panic proposal is what I see it as. Maybe a bit
Yeah.
of manipulation proposal.
Hmm.
So her main kind of thought is whether it's even possible if she could like sustain this life. And it's really not, obviously, for anybody on the outside.
Well, yeah, I guess her thing is, can I keep this a secret
Yes.
from him?
Yeah.
Like forever. But like, I think we've already established that they don't age as quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Like they do have longer lifespans. Like what's going to happen then? What's going to happen when he realizes she cannot have children? Like
Yeah, there's a lot of issues that she doesn't think of. And like he's already, I think, like, I want to say 10, 15 years older.
yeah, he's already like approaching 40, if not 40 already.
Yeah. Yeah. So it just seems a bit wild. But like while she's thinking through this, she doesn't even let herself wonder if Phillip is actually like the right person for her. She's just trying to figure out logistically if she can like make it work. And then
Yeah. Feelings aside, could I logistically do this?
exactly. And then she's like, she wonders if she could tell Phillip. And she's like, when she was engaged to Clay, she says that she would have accepted him if he had told her that he was a werewolf, which obviously is easy to say in hindsight, also when you're a wolf yourself. But I think that she probably actually would have. And it just tells you how much she did love him at that specific point in time, that she honestly would have been like, yeah, that's completely, obviously, maybe not completely fine, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So she is in her office and Clay calls her and says he's coming to meet her, and she agrees. And he's there trying to explain his case of why she should let him talk to her, and she already agreed. He's like, oh, okay, well, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Elena like goes downstairs to wait for him, and she kind of thinks she's feeling a bit anxious, but it's clearly something else. She actually momentarily blacks out, and she just keeps ignoring the anxiety, thinking it's just about the situation she's in. And she waits before she like finally is like, I should go back to the apartment to make sure that everything's okay. It's like Clay would
Yeah.
only have taken, if he said he was going to be there in 15 minutes, you should expect him in 5. Like he's not one to make her wait at all. At the apartment, she pushes the door open and she finds Phillip on the ground bleeding. And she is obviously in panic mode. And the first thing she thinks is that it's Clay who did it, which it kind of hurt my feelings.
Like, I guess, yeah, it's like, how can you love somebody and then be like, oh, yeah, I think you attacked my potential fiance on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I agree. So I was just like, are we doing this again? We've done this already before in this book. I just feel like maybe we shouldn't jump here again. Anyway, then she goes to the phone to call 911, and she notices that the phone, like the cord to the phone is cut. And then she's like, I know it's not Clay. Like maybe he would attack Phillip if Phillip was an ass to him or something, but he wouldn't be sadistic enough to actually make it so that I can't save his life.
Mm-hmm.
So she eventually finds Philip's cell phone and calls 911. Then she smells Phillip, which she should have done in the first place, but okay. Yes. And she realizes that it was Thomas LeBlanc that did this. So she binds his wounds with torn sheets, and then she notices a syringe under the table, and she kind of goes to check it, and she notices Clay's wedding ring and a note from D, I'll say it with quotation marks, on the table, telling her to meet him at a motel the next day at 10 a.m. So D is Daniel, obviously, because Thomas LeBlanc is the one that stabbed Phillip. So the Mutts have Clay. And
so they must have drugged him with a syringe, because doesn't she like smell the syringe to figure out?
She smells both sides. So she smells the tip and she's like, that went into Clay. And then she smells the plunger and she was like, Daniel pushed that. And then she smells inside of the syringe and she's like, that's chemically.
That's a chemical.
That's a chemical. So that's what happened. Yes, she does realize that. So she kind of realizes that when she blacked out before, that was her reacting to Clay being like sedated,
knocked out. Yeah.
So clearly there's a bond between Maker and werewolf. Yeah.
I took that as like a mate thing, and maybe it's just because I've read too much Sarah J.
Maybe.
But like, because I thought they mentioned that at some point that she talked about how mates could like feel each other's emotions and stuff, but she was like, it's obviously like not possible to test because there's no female mates.
I just thought that she had said that she felt it with Clay, and my assumption, because I'm reading a bunch of vampire shit lately, was that it was like your maker, like a lot of vampire lore, if your maker is killed, then you feel it.
Right.
So yeah, that's kind of where my brain went. But either way, I think she was being willfully ignorant, not realizing what was happening.
Yeah.
But she kind of tells herself that he has to be alive, and she would obviously know otherwise. And like I 100% agree. I think she would know, because she'd probably black out again, or worse. So she goes to leave to go meet Daniel, go get Clay, basically. But Phillip wakes up as she's trying to like step over his body on the floor, and she tells him that help is on the way, but he's really worried about her, because he knows that the men that came in and broke into the house are looking for her. So he says that she can't leave, and she kind of starts panicking because she needs to get to the hotel to help Clay, and Phillip is kind of like blocking her way, but he's also panicking a bit because they broke into their home and stabbed him, and they're looking for her. So he's very adamant that she shouldn't leave.
But also she wants to leave and he is still like very injured.
Yes. That's
so I feel like her choice has been made, right? Yes. Like she keeps trying to leave.
She's like, an ambulance will come downstairs. Like, don't worry about it. They're like,
yeah.
Hey, how's the ambulance going to get up if nobody can buzz them in? This is a condo. Like, I'm sure there's security people somewhere and they'll eventually let them in. Like, but we don't know if the security guard might be on a break. Are we sure someone's going to let them in? It seems a bit much that she's just like, yeah, I need to leave him.
Peace out, Phillip.
He'll be fine.
You might be almost dying, but it's fine.
Yeah. So she does tell him she's going to go downstairs and wait for the ambulance, which is a lie. She is not planning on doing that. But she actually starts panicking so much that it kind of forces the change on her right in front of Phillip. And he is terrified. So Elena's wolf form keeps panicking, and she's very afraid of where Clay is, and all she can think of is to run. And it's funny because I literally just reread Blood and Chocolate, and this is exactly what happened in it. Is she changed in front of the guy and then jumped out a balcony. But she does the same thing, and she flies out the balcony, and she hurts her paw. And I'm thinking it's kind of like if you twist your ankle when you like land a bit weird.
Oh yeah.
But a wolf. And she's in the middle of downtown Toronto, just jumped out of a balcony, and she runs into the parking garage. She has a bit of a panic here because she needs to change back and get her ID and money and obviously clothes, but she can't go back because Phillip is there. The ambulance is going to be there soon. So she's just like, I can't think about this any longer. I just need to be moving. I need to run.
Yeah.
All she can think about is the deadline. And I feel like, especially as a wolf, her like thoughts are more one-tracked than they would have been if she could actually stop and think about it as a human. But she doesn't let herself. So this part is like a bit crazy, and the way the book is written, it's almost like it's Elena reflecting on it, and it isn't her thoughts at the moment, because she does say she would have been smarter to wait in the parking garage and like get a flight to the States.
Yeah, wait for the ambulance to come pick up Phillip and then go back into their apartment, grab her stuff. Yeah. 100% would have been smart.
Yeah. And like I don't really know how long this journey is and if it's even possible for an animal to do. Or
what? Toronto to like upstate New York?
Yeah, I don't even know how long that would take in a car. I don't know if you could drive it. So she says that she couldn't imagine waiting, so she just kind of like shuts her brain off and just runs. And she like hit a barrier, she says, at Niagara Falls border crossing. But after a bit of thought, she was lucky enough to be able to slip into the back of a truck trailer that like had a canvas flap over the back.
I don't understand why, like, if she's a wolf, like, why is that running into a problem at the border? Like, she's just an animal. Like, why couldn't she just cross the border as an animal and everybody be like, oh my God, it's an animal? And then just be like, okay, and I'll prance away.
Yeah, I feel like at the border, there's a lot of people with guns, and they don't just let animals on the roads, though.
But they're not going to shoot a wolf for being on the road. Especially if it sort of stays, like, on the side and doesn't try and veer into traffic.
I don't know. Like, it's like when there's bears and stuff around, they catch them and relocate them. So I guess there's the fear of, like, would they tranquilize her and then take her somewhere
I guess.
and release her into the wild, and then she's even more screwed? Or put her in a zoo.
When I drive on the highway, I've seen bears.
Oh yeah, for sure. But I think the border crossing is a bit different anyway, because like
I guess
there's people watching everywhere near it, so that you can like check that nobody's trying to run across. So yeah, I've only once or twice ever crossed a border in car, because coming from where we are, you fly everywhere. But yeah, so once the truck basically gets across, she realizes that they're heading in the wrong direction, and she panics and just jumps out of the back. And obviously she hits her left paw hard again, and she notices her stomach's growling in protest because she missed multiple meals. But she's kind of too panicked to stop running, and she knows if she stops, she might not be able to start again. So she turns off her brain again and keeps running. Around midnight, she hears Jeremy in her head, which is impossible. As we said earlier, he can only contact them when they're sleeping. So she kind of wonders if she's hallucinating. but she can't really answer him well. So she just sends him images of like where she is, basically. And she just keeps running, but eventually she actually does start hallucinating. She sees images of Clay and of Toronto and Stonehaven. She never sees images of Phillip, which is interesting, in my opinion.
Is it interesting?
Just another fun tidbit to point out that someone should be pointing out to Elena. But she eventually blacks out. So she wakes up in a field, confused and unable to move. And at this point, she's a human again. And Jeremy shows up and picks her up. And she tries to tell them about the deadline, but she's like so exhausted and she can't do it. And she just passes out again. The next time she wakes up, she's still in the car and Nick is there. And she tries to ask what time it is, but she can't really get it out. And Nick tries to give her water, but she's finally able to like ask the time and is told that it's 11:30. So she starts to full on panic. She obviously isn't thinking right, or she could like use her words, but she like tries to scratch and punch and kick her way out of the car. She gets the door open, but she's pulled back, and Jeremy kind of like knocks her out gently by like a pressure point or some shit. Like, of course he can do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She wakes up in a memory, which I think is just another way to show us a flashback. But she's thinking of the times that she was in the cage before, when Jeremy put her there because she was uncontrollable. And she is just thinking of like the few times that Clay was sitting outside and asking her to like behave so that she could be let out and that kind of thing. But she's also in the cage in real life now, and Jeremy is outside. So she somewhat tries to explain to him the issues and asks him to let her go, but she's also not being logical. Obviously, she's clearly panicking. She's been panicking since she walked into the apartment. So
yeah.
Jeremy tells her that he can't let her out. She would just throw herself away too with Clay instead of saving him, and she would doom them both, kind of. And Elena's super mad at Jeremy because, well, she kind of tells him she is. I feel like she just kind of does things that she knows will hurt his feelings. She's like, if something happens to him, it's all your fault because you didn't let me get to him. And he's like, he doesn't even say anything. And then she's like, actually, it's all my fault. Like, I should have been there. And she even says that, like, she kind of breaks down a bit. And she's like, I can't believe you didn't tell me. And Jeremy's like, what do you mean? And she's like, you didn't tell me that Clay was in danger too. It wasn't just about like protecting her. She should have been protecting Clay. Yeah. And I do kind of like that they didn't take the damsel in this book. Like, I do like that twist that it was actually like Clay, the big powerful guy, was the one that was taken, and it kind of wasn't what I expected to happen. And obviously it wasn't what they expected either, but it was a nice twist in the book.
Mm-hmm. And I like that obviously he's caught. So I like that she's the one that she's going to be the hero. Mm-hmm. She's the one doing the rescuing.
Yes, exactly. So she has to spend the night in the cage, and she's crying and raging, and then she feels embarrassed. But Jeremy like knows her too well, so he knows that he can't let her out right now because she's not ready to be sensible, to say the least. Jeremy does tell her that he contacted Daniel through a P.O. box, which is kind of dating them, that he gave them. And you're like, cell phones are a thing. I know I've had this conversation every fucking week, but cell phones are a thing. They're a thing.
And but like, it's not like we're talking like 20 years ago, people had like the Zach Morris, like box phone.
No.
Like cell phones were a thing, like a full-on thing. Like, you could get a cell phone. It might have been a flip phone.
You can still text. Just seems wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, so He, I guess, sent Daniel a message and said that Elena wouldn't be there, but that they were willing to negotiate. And he kind of reasons with Elena that Daniel knows how much Clay means and that they would obviously do a lot to get him back. So they're not going to kill him. Like, he's a bargaining piece. They can't just kill him. That'd be ridiculous. So the next morning, Jeremy comes down and they have a response from Daniel. And it's a photo of a drugged and bound Clay, and he is beaten to shit. But it's from that day. There's like a newspaper in it, like they always do. All those kidnappers do.
Yeah.
Elena asks to see the letter that obviously came with it, but they're keeping it from her. And as a reader, we all know it's because the only thing that Daniel wants is Elena. So clearly that's what he's asking for. So, like, I get Jeremy's trying not to let her know that, but, like, she should know that. I don't even know why she's asking for the letter. You know what he wants. She asks Jeremy to help and to be let out of the cage, but Jeremy just says that he'll be back later. So he does actually let her out that afternoon, and she immediately obviously wanted to know his plans, but he won't tell her. She apologizes for Toronto, saying it's her fault and that, like, she's sorry that she screwed up and stuff. But he disagrees, and he kind of admits to her that, like, this is something that he wouldn't tell anyone else, but he wasn't ready for this kind of, like, test to his alpha-ness. And
by that, we mean a bunch of rogues banding together, turning a bunch of serial killers, and trying to usurp him.
How foolish he wasn't ready for this.
Right? Like, doesn't everybody consider that, like,
day one?
The basic?
Day one.
Come on, Jeremy.
So, yeah, he kind of admits that he screwed up, which is, like, I think big of him, but also I don't think, like, this is his best use of people to not tell them things. And, like, he should have known her better. Like, he does know her well, but he should have known her better in this part.
I also will say that I feel like a part of it too is that, like, she left. Like, maybe he's not telling her because, like, God only knows, maybe she'll leave again. Like, I just, like, I feel like she shouldn't be able to demand that he tell her things. Like, you left.
Yeah.
And you were adamant that you were done.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't think she's allowed, regardless of what Clay means to her, or, like, regardless of anything, she doesn't get to demand shit.
Yeah.
She's been back for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And in the beginning of it, she was like, I'll only help you guys find this / kill this one mutt if you let me leave for reals. So, yeah. So he doesn't tell her anything, which, sure. And Elena,
you do you.
You do you. Elena kind of enlists Nick as a co-conspirator, and she forms her own plan while kind of still playing the, like, pissed role that Jeremy expects. So, like, she's not being docile or anything. She's still clearly visibly pissed that she doesn't know what's going on. But she's trying to figure out as much as possible and kind of make her own plan. She does at this point call the hospital to check on Phillip. And he's going to be fine. No big deal. All good.
Now we can just forget about Phillip, throw him to the side.
Completely gone. So she pretends to be his sister, and they're like, do you want to talk to him? And she's like, hell no. Mostly because she's afraid of his reaction to her wolf change, which is, like,
valid point.
Very valid. Like, duh. Her next move is to call the local realtors and the cottage association and check on any homes or cottage sales / rentals in the area, which is, I thought, was, like, a very brilliant idea on her part. It doesn't pan out, but I thought that it was very smart, and I don't know if I would have thought of that. Elena then, like, talks to Jeremy again, and he says that like he understands that she's upset because she cares about Clay. He's like, we all care about Clay. And she's like, that's not why. I'm just upset because it's my fault that he's gone. And like she feels responsible. And you're just like, you silly girl.
Yep. Bitch, get a clue.
Bitch, get a clue. That too. Yeah. So Elena also starts to kind of think about like the dynamics of pack life. So like the alpha leads completely alone. They make the decisions. Everyone else follows completely without question. And she kind of thinks that isn't the way that they should be living. Like it would be helpful to give advice, but she knows that Jeremy wouldn't be able to take it because he's in the same mindset of like he has to make the decisions, he has to come up with everything. But it is just kind of a look into like how she thinks that pack dynamics could maybe evolve in the future.
Which is, yeah, sort of like a little nugget for future books. If anybody gets into them and like reads ahead.
Yeah.
It's just a little nugget. So Elena decides to find out more about the other serial killer that no one has met yet. So we've met Thomas LeBlanc, who is Karl Marsten, our like sophisticated, like fancy jewel thief wolf. So Thomas LeBlanc is his sort of protege. That's the serial killer he turned. We haven't met the serial killer that Daniel turned yet. So Elena decides, I mean, he's obviously in the mix, so we should probably do a little research about him. So his name is Victor Olsen. Apparently they broke him out of jail because he was in jail for raping and killing a 10-year-old girl. So already we can tell he's a real prize.
Decent human.
Yeah. So it sort of said that like he was obviously he's a huge jerkwad. But there was some issues with his case. Like he was convicted of only being a lifetime pedophile. But apparently the judge didn't find the victim testimony reliable enough for a conviction. And then I guess he got out after and killed her then.
Yeah.
And then went to jail. It like it just shows you like I'm sure stuff like that happens all the time. So like the justice system really blows.
Yeah.
Right? Daniel sort of picked him because he was a super skilled stalker. Apparently she was reading an article about him and a cop that was on the case said he'd never seen someone so skilled at quote unquote the hunt. Like, I'm sorry. If you are a policeman, you do not ever say that about a child molester / murderer to a journalist. Like, I just can't.
No.
Like, you
Like,
dummy.
Are you trying to be canceled?
Or like, are you trying to, like, he was essentially complimenting a murderer.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh man, you're so good at stalking and killing people. Congratulations.
Yeah. It's
like, what is wrong with him?
Too much.
If I had access to this fictional character, I would smack him upside the head.
Yes, I agree.
So, I guess after like getting this information, she decides that she needs to do the laundry. So, you know, nice domestic chore for her. She like was folding Clay's clothes and it made her sad and like she could still smell him but whatever, she put them away. And when she was putting the clothes away into his closet, she found a huge pile of Christmas presents for her. So we talked last week about how everyone had expected her to come back for Christmas and she didn't. And Nick made the comment in last week's episode that, well, Clay didn't show his face because he was busy waiting for you. So like he was constantly out in the driveway waiting for you to come and you never came. So this was sort of her sort of, oh shit moment. Like,
yeah.
Like shit, they were waiting for me to come back. And it just blows my mind that she never considered that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I understand she was busy having her own life and doing her thing, but like, she didn't even like call anybody to say she wasn't coming
Yeah.
or like, anyway, it's just like, I feel like this is her realization that um, she actually had people that cared about her.
And she was the one that was being shitty?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then she starts talking Christmas. So she said that Clay was the one who had given her her first real Christmas. She said, like, even though she did celebrate with her foster families when she was in foster homes, she said she felt like it was fake because there was no real like attachment or bond with any of them. Apparently, Clay spent weeks researching researching the holiday and gave her all the trappings of a traditional Christmas.
Mm.
And then I guess they had ended up breaking up like right before Easter. And then the next Christmas, she was a werewolf and she was still in and out of the cage for being like wild. And Clay was also banished for turning her. So they didn't really have a Christmas that year.
Yep.
Then the very next year, they, I guess, Jeremy and Nick and Antonio and Logan and Peter all gave Elena this gigantic family Christmas, but it was Clay's idea. And even though he was still banished, he asked Jeremy to organize it for Elena.
Mm-hmm.
So for Christmas that year, her gift to Clay was to repeal his banishment. So that's how he became unbanished.
Yeah. Because really, I think the only reason Jeremy kept him banished was because he knew that Elena struggled so much with obviously her life and would struggle even more if he was around. So like I think Jeremy had probably already forgiven him realistically,
Yeah.
but
Yeah. I agree. She sort of thought in her head that Clay would always be the most stable thing in her life. And she knew he would always be there when she went back to him, which is like super selfish.
mm-hmm.
Like, and we've talked about it before, how, but like the fact that somebody's going to be there for you. So you purposely, like, she lashed out at him. She hurt him. She was with another dude, but yet she kept going back to him because he was her safe place. He was her comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Like how big of an idiot does she need to be to understand what that means?
Yeah.
Anyway, this sort of culminated in he's the most stable thing in my life. He'll always be there for me. So I need to get him back. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no ifs, ands, or buts. I need to get him back. So she has a plan.
I'm sure it's very smart.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. So she sends Daniel a note to meet him to meet her in Bear Valley. Nick is really not happy about it, but she asks him to go with her as her like muscle. She's smart about that anyway. She's not going alone.
Yeah, that is smart.
They meet at a coffee shop and they just sit and have a chat and have a lovely time.
Lovely.
He sort of makes his offer. He says, I want you for Clay. And she says that she doesn't actually think he wants her for her. Like, she doesn't think that he actually like enjoys anything about her.
Mm-hmm.
But because Clay has her, it makes him want her.
Yeah.
So like everything is about spiting Clay.
Yeah.
Because like Daniel knows if I have Elena, Clay will be pissed. And that's what he wants. But he also said he wants her to start his own pack. So we all know what's going to happen. He's like, but we're not going to breed have wolves like everyone else. We're going to breed full werewolves because you're a werewolf. I'm a werewolf. We'll make full wolves.
Which is interesting because it's the first time in this book for sure that we ever hear that maybe she could have kids.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Because we have been operating under the assumption that Clay turned her into a wolf, so now she cannot have children. We don't actually know that's true. She very well could. She hasn't had any testing done.
I don't know if you could even test that.
But Daniel then says, like, what I'll do is I'll let Clay go, then I'll take you to a secure location, and essentially he said he'd put you in a cage. Like, she sort of said, oh yeah, what, you're gonna put me in a cage? And he said, yes, but a nice one, like a luxurious cage. So, like, what, it's gonna have like a nice bed in it so that he can
rape her. Is that what you're getting at?
It is, and I just
didn't want to say it. I know.
I don't like it.
No.
So, and he said he'd put her in the cage until she realizes he's the right choice.
Like, all of the guys think this. They're like, I'll change your mind. I'll make you realize that I'm the one.
No.
The last guy that thought that got shot and then hit by a transport truck, sir. So you watch yourself.
That's true. But she actually considers it. And I feel like part of it is because, one, like, I just feel like she knows that regardless of where she ends up, Clay and Jeremy will find her.
Yes. But also, like, if she trades herself, like, clearly they hate Clay, they're going to beat him up, but he thinks he's in love with her. So, like, she will be treated
with a modicum, a modicum of respect.
Yes. And, like, if she plays a part, she'll be able to escape eventually. It's the very, like, same as was it our last book, Shadow and Bone, when she's like, if you let him live, I won't fight you every day.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. She said that she agreed, so she does agree to the terms, but she says instead of you letting Clay go, she actually wants to see Clay released in a public place before she goes with him, because she doesn't trust that Daniel will actually do what he says and release him. So, although I feel like I don't think he would actually kill Clay, because how would him having Elena and spiting Clay and, like, fathering children with Elena, like, none of that means much without Clay witnessing it and knowing about it, right?
Yeah, I think the only issue, I guess, is that, like, if Clay is alive in the world, he is never going to stop looking for Elena. And, like, maybe Daniel doesn't realize that, but we do. So that's kind of why I'm like, I think he would kill him, because if he doesn't, he's just going to have a target on his back forever. Like, they're never going to be able to.
But at the same time, like, he doesn't really fear Clay, right? Like, he thinks he's better than Clay.
He thinks he's smarter, I guess, which is dumb. But I do think he thinks he's smarter, but
So I just, like, I feel like none of it is worth it if he actually kills Clay.
Yeah.
Like, he's not going to get the same satisfaction. Anyway, Daniel refuses this deal. He says that he's not going to release Clay until after she goes with him. And this sort of makes her realize that he has no plans to release Clay at all. So she gets up to leave. She's like, no, you don't have, like, you're not willing to play ball, so I'm going to leave. So Daniel then tries to sort of, like, goad her a little bit. So he's like, oh, well, that's too bad, because Clay's not going to last much longer. And that sort of makes her snap. And, like, she sees red, and, like, she essentially calls him a joke. And sort of then, like, goads him in return and is like, you had to use a needle to capture him. And you beat him up after you drug him so that he can't fight back. And he's all tied up. So she essentially says to Daniel, like, you're not a wolf and you're not a real man either. You're a
piece of shit.
Yes, thank you. And then she even says that if he hurts Clay or kills him, she will hunt him until the end of the earth. And when she catches him, she's going to castrate him, torture him, and blind him, and keep torturing him for the rest of his life, keeping him alive forever. And like, that is dedication.
Yes.
Like,
Yep.
that is something. Like, good job. If somebody makes me really mad, I might use this.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Because it's a good one.
Mm.
I can't use it at work, but who knows?
Elsewhere in life, you can.
Elsewhere in life, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, so after that, she sort of gets up to leave and they part ways, and she went home back to Stonehaven, and then she realizes that that was probably a big mistake. Like, all she did was just make Daniel angry.
Yep.
And he's probably going to take it out on Clay. So,
Good job.
good job, Elena. So she realized that in order to find Clay, she was going to have to try and use the new mutts, who don't act like wolves, but they act like humans. Like she says that they have been working under the sort of assumption that the werewolves are all going to behave like they usually do.
Mm.
But as we've seen with Thomas LeBlanc, they aren't acting like wolves. They're acting like disturbed humans. So she's going to try and get in their heads by being disturbed humans.
Mm.
And this is when it's finally her, like, she has her sort of click in moment that she always had a propensity for violence and anger. And that's what Clay saw in her and found a soulmate in. She said that she knows that it's her upbringing that caused it. And, she was always really good at hiding it. But she said that she has to go back into the mistrust and the hatred and the rage in order to get into the heads of the new serial killer mutts.
Mm-hmm.
So she's going to try and find them and figure out where they're keeping Clay. So she looks back through the articles about Victor Olson and realizes that he used to watch his victims sleep at night and that it gave them peace. So she thinks that she can find him watching little girls sleeping in Bear Alley. So she sneaks out to go looking for him. And gross.
Yeah.
Like, just gross. But
Not
also
super surprising, but gross.
Yeah, but also, like, good on her for figuring that out. But, like, I don't know how you could... gross.
Yeah.
Anyway, she does find him, and she sort of just waits until he leaves. And she follows him out of town, and he parks in this really big overgrown driveway, and he goes to sleep. What a moron.
Yeah.
So she attacks him. And I don't know how she does it, but she manages to, like, lock him in his seatbelt.
I know, the author explained it, and I was like, I cannot wrap my hand around what you're saying. I do not understand at all.
I know.
She's like,
but
and then I did this, this, and this, and this, and I'm like, none of those words make sense.
No. But yeah, she, like, managed to do something to, like, tie him up with his seatbelt and essentially tying him down so he cannot move. And then she slashes his wrists to start making him, like, bleed out. And then she starts to question him. And again, I think that is a very smart tactic. Like,
well, yeah. And now if he dies, everyone's going to think you just commit suicide because he's a piece of shit. So you're like, brilliant.
Yeah.
So smart.
Agreed. So she interrogates him. He sings like a canary.
It's true.
Tells her everything. And afterwards, like, she kept saying, like, oh, if you don't tell me, I guess you're going to bleed out and die. But if you tell me, I'll wrap you up. I'll wrap up your wounds and it'll staunch the blood in time for you to get to the hospital. And then, so he told her all the info, and I guess we can see where this is going. She does not bind his wounds. She leaves him to bleed out and die And I think it's just a good call, really.
Yeah. She's worried that she'll feel bad about it and stuff, but she's like, how many lies did he tell the kids that he was raping and killing? So
Yeah. Anyway, it's just the best scenario, I think, for everybody involved.
agreed.
So she gets back in her car. She calls Nick on a cell phone.
There are cell phones in this world?
And she told him what she was doing and told him where the Mutts live. And so she goes to the Mutt's house. Hang
So smart.
on. I guess she just goes up and knocks on the door. And Karl Marsten answers, and he's like, "What are you doing here? Like, you need to leave."
I love that part.
I do too.
I like him a lot.
Yeah, and like, even though he's a bad guy right now,
Mhm.
we've talked about how in future books he actually ends up like as a main character, and we see sort of his character onion peel away. So like, there's a lot more to him than that, and he is trying to help her out here by saying like, you need to leave. You're not going to survive this. There's like, obviously, I think there's at least 2 other werewolves inside. Like, there's no way she could fight 2-on-1 or even 3-on-1.
No. But I also I don't remember him in future books. I don't know if I didn't get there or what, but
You didn't.
okay. I don't remember that. But it's obvious in this that like I like him as a character anyway. But it's in this scene, it's clear that he's trying to get her to like just leave.
Yeah.
Like, you know where we are.
Yeah. I think it's Personal Demon, maybe. It's the story that stars the half demon Hope.
Okay.
So Karl is just saying like he just wants territory, and that's all he's ever wanted. But the pack never lets him have it because only the pack can have territory. Mutts can never have it. So he's like, I just want some territory so I can settle down, live in a mansion, and like just live my life.
Live in a mansion.
And like, the biggest concern I think for Mutts staking out territory is that they're worried that it'll start a pattern, like that people will start noticing killings and stuff like that. But we all know that the werewolves don't have to kill. Like, that's just the Mutts. Like, that's how they live their lives. Yeah. And they just kill people sometimes. Karl Marsten is not on that level. Like, he's not a murderer.
And
so
he's
like,
very good at covering his tracks. Like, nobody would actually find him if he did.
So yeah, so it's, I feel like the pack doesn't have to worry about him with his territory, you know what I mean, in the same way.
I agree.
They don't have to worry that he's going to raise suspicions that he's a werewolf by killing people left, right, and center. So he's like, just go. Like, give me a little bit of territory and run away and come back later, right?
Yeah.
But of course, Daniel wakes up and comes to the door. So obviously she can't go anywhere now. She's made her bed and now has to lie in it.
I don't think she would have left anyway, but
I don't think so either.
I did appreciate Karl being like, what the fuck, man?
Yeah. Karl and Daniel sort of tell Thomas LeBlanc to go look for the cavalry, not thinking that Elena would come alone. Like, they're like, well, she's not dumb enough to come by herself. She's obviously got people like around. So he comes back and he's like, oh yeah, I saw them. They're pulled over by the cops. So that was actually part of her plan, that they would eventually come, and it wouldn't be 3-on-1. It would be like 4-on-1 or 4-on-3. So she's like, shit, because they've been pulled over by the cops.
Well, she doesn't even want to believe it. She's like, I'm just going to pretend that this isn't real.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
I guess they bring Clay. I guess they've been holding him in the basement, and they bring him upstairs. And they're like struggling to reach each other. And like, Clay is all bound up, and, you know, I guess they're holding on to her, and like, it's just a sweet moment. Like, they're fighting so hard to reach each other. anyway, she sort of offers herself in exchange. She tells him, let Clay go. I'll stay here with you. And Clay's response is, don't you dare. And it just made my heart do a little like pitter patter. It's just so cute. Anyway. It
was very cute.
And then a big twist of the book is coming. So I guess this is what Daniel sort of wants, right? Wants Elena. But LeBlanc is there and he says, no deal. And then he reaches around and slits Daniel's throat. So like Daniel is supposed to be like our big bad of this book, right? Like he's the one that orchestrated the whole let's turn serial killers into werewolves scenario and let's march on the packs that we can have power and blah blah blah. This was his big idea, and it just was the most anticlimactic villain death ever.
Yeah, but it was also kind of surprising because I honestly didn't think, and it just shows you how much all of the werewolves have underestimated this stupid human.
Yeah,
like Elena did it, and Jeremy did it when he got stabbed and Peter died. And Clay did it-ish, not to his detriment, really. Like, there's not much he could have done in the whole situation when he actually got attacked. But everybody underestimated him, and he came out on top in this one instance. But yeah, it was a bit dumb.
Yeah. So I guess Daniel bleeds out and dies. And LeBlanc then turns on Karl Marsten. Marsten grabs a gun, and they sort of agree to go their separate ways. And Marsten says, I'm going to take Clay because I just want territory, and Clay would be a really good bargaining chip for me. You can take Elena because, you have this vendetta with her and you like girls. So you take her. So I guess Karl sort of starts to struggle and starts a struggle with Elena to try and get her bound up and ready to go. He's holding her down, and he quote unquote knocks her unconscious. He doesn't, but he tells LeBlanc he does. So she's on the ground, he's holding her, and they have this struggle, and then he pretend hits her and makes her look knocked out, but she's not actually knocked out. But he's oh, I knocked her out. So he goes over to untie Clay to take him, and LeBlanc is saying, stop, I haven't agreed to this deal of you taking him and me taking her. And then all of a sudden Karl Marsten stands up and all of a sudden lunges for LeBlanc. So everybody's just turning on each other. It's all the villains are just at each other. Elena didn't even have to do anything.
Which is kind of funny because it's literally the reason that she said that they can't team up. In the beginning of the book, she was like, there's no way mutts would team up together. They can't do that. And then they do fuck it up.
They do, yeah. So while they're fighting each other, she crawls over to Clay and gets him untied and out of his cuffs. He's like, listen, there's no time. You have to get out. And again, it's just showing us another side of Clay being super selfless. He's not cared about himself. He's cared about her. And it's only at this point, this is the point where she realizes that she came for Clay because she loved him. She didn't come for the pack or for Jeremy. She came for her because she needs Clay. And it's bitch, really? Really now you realize you love him? Come on.
Yep.
Come on. Come on. Anyway, she says she would rather die than leave him, which is a bit dramatic, but what odds? You do you. And this she starts to change at this point. I guess LeBlanc and Karl Marsten's sort of fight peters out, and LeBlanc runs away. And she has to chase him. So this sort of like harkens us back to the very first week when remember, she's changed in the city of Toronto and she's going through the alleys and she stalks this dude and she says, I'm glad he doesn't run because if he ran, I would have to chase him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's happening here. LeBlanc runs as a human and she has to chase him.
Yeah.
So he runs into the forest and she goes after him. He finds a thicket and she's expecting him to change into a werewolf, but he doesn't. He fights it. He's like in the process of changing, but he like fights back. And she notices when she's sort of looking for him, he doesn't use any of his wolf instincts.
Mm-hmm.
So like he could be like sniffing the air to figure out what direction she's coming from and like using his hearing to hear her stepping through the forest, but like he doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
He's a moron.
Yep.
So he hides in this thicket and he's like waiting for her and he jumps out and like slashes her leg. And then he sort of like taunts her, but like she's a fucking wolf. And he's got this like little switchblade. So like she jumps at him and he like has this little switchblade that barely penetrates through her like thick meaty werewolf shoulder.
Meaty.
Yeah. And she rips his throat out. Good for her, man.
Yeah.
Like he scared the shit out of her when he was like stalking her and almost killing her in that parking garage and like almost shot her in the head. That really scared her. I'm really glad she did this for herself.
Agreed. And like he also scared her when they were in the police station. Like he is just a creepy, scary dude and he deserves this.
Yes. That's true. So I guess Jeremy, Antonio, and Nick eventually show up, like after everything has happened.
Mm-hmm.
And they like ream her out for going off by herself. They're like, you are a moron. And she's like, yeah. But surprisingly, Karl Marsten didn't leave. Like he stuck around and like helped like untie Clay and like sort of like stay with him, which was nice.
It was, yeah. He didn't fuck Clay over or fuck Elena over just for territory.
Yeah. So they agreed to give him territory in Wyoming. I've never been to Wyoming. It feels like cowboyish.
Yeah, based on what they said, it's maybe not desirable, but I'm like...
Take what you can get.
Wouldn't anything be okay? I don't know.
Yeah.
And also, there may be a new age coming.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, so he's going to Wyoming.
That sounds like something.
Turns out Clay had a broken leg, 4 broken ribs, and a dislocated shoulder. Yikes. And she decided that Elena finally decided that she belongs at Stonehaven. And that's the home she's choosing. So well done on finally making a choice. But yeah, so like we all knew it was coming.
Mm-hmm.
But she finally said in her head that's where she's staying. Mm-hmm. Apparently she like stayed by Clay's side for weeks. And she finally sees that it's the pack that's actually giving her everything she wanted as a child. Mm-hmm. Like a stable home and a family and, you know, I feel like we've been saying this for this whole book.
Yeah.
That she's clueless that her real family is like right in front of her face.
Yeah.
And she also finally admits that her personality is not because she's a wolf. Mm-hmm. Like she was already aggressive and hot-tempered and moody before she became a werewolf. Mm-hmm. So like she's finally admitting like this is who I am.
Yeah.
And she's also like, again, this is her epiphanies moment. She also finally realized why she chose Phillip in the first place. Yeah. Because he reminded her of Jeremy. He was patient and kind and a good person.
Yeah. Which is sweet. And I don't know, I feel like this realization might help her and Jeremy's relationship develop better on her side.
Yeah.
Because, like, I feel like he thinks that their relationship is, like, okay, but she just doesn't think enough of herself.
Yeah. We have talked before about how she really doesn't think she's worthy of Jeremy's actual love and affection. And that if he is treating her kindly, it's because she believes he feels like he's stuck with her. So I guess she chose sort of Phillip as a surrogate, and she like picked and chose what he saw to make him love her. But she also says, like, just because she loved him doesn't mean she was in love with him. And like, you think? Come on.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Obvious to us at the very beginning.
Yes. She actually goes to Toronto to talk to Phillip, considering she finally like gets up the guts to go talk to him. Considering, like, you know, he saw her turn into a werewolf. But when she goes to the apartment, he denies everything. He's like, I didn't see anything. Nothing. I didn't see it. So I guess they just part ways, and that's just it.
Yeah. Sorry. I said earlier when he was talking about the houses that he wanted to sublet their house. But at this point, he says he has sublet their house and her shit is in the hallway in boxes. But yeah, I do think it's a bit extra that he just sublets the house without talking to her, though.
Considering it's her apartment.
Yeah. He does do that. And then he packs up her stuff and she's like, she doesn't care because she already made up her mind.
No, but at the same time, like...
It'd be the same as her being like, hey, get the fuck out of my apartment. It's mine. Like, what if she showed up with her key and he wasn't even there? It was whoever sublet it to. It just seems wild.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's all.
So they just part ways, like, not super amicably, but also not amicably. Like, I think he's too decent a person to be a real jackass about it. Yes. But at the same time, like, we can definitely tell that he's like,
what the fuck?
Yeah. He does make sure that she takes Clay's wedding ring that Daniel had left behind, that he never took off. Like, that was a really nice thing that he did.
Which makes you wonder if he realizes that she loved him too. Maybe he realized that the cousin thing was a lie. Because she's like, that's the only thing she really went back for.
Yes. Anyway, she sort of says in her mind, like, she still loves Clay. And so I guess she leaves and is like going down the stairs to leave the building. And she admits to herself, like, yes, I love Clay. And yes, like, Clay is going to be the last person in my life. But I still can't give him everything he wants. Like, we still have stuff to work through. And I think that's actually, like, fair.
Super healthy.
Yeah. Like, she knows that they still have issues. Like, she obviously is not going to get over all of these resentments she has over being turned.
No.
Like, she's not going to get over that in a night, right? It's going to take work.
Exactly.
So, you know, I really liked that. And when she leaves the apartment, Clay is standing there. So he sort of went after her thinking she was going back, like, to stay.
Yeah.
And so he went after her to, like, proclaim his love and to, like...
beg her to stay with him, kind of.
Yeah, and sort of be like, you know, I really want you to come home. And he's like, I think he said something like, you know, I know I've said it, but I just want to say it again and, like, have it be an option for you. Like, know that this is an option. And then he said, he's like, I'm working on myself to be better for her.
Yeah.
And I just want to tell him, like, you shouldn't have to change for the person you love.
Yes, true. But, like, there are a few things that, like, he could probably work on.
Like?
Don't just bite people because you don't want them to be kicked out of your life. Like, you can't just have everything you want.
That's true. Yes. However, do we not, like, I feel like he's learned that lesson.
I 100% agree, but I don't think that Elena has accepted that he's learned that lesson. So I do see why. Anyway, I think that they need to do work together. if they want to be together. Not necessarily change who they are, but they do need to do some work as a couple if they want to stay together.
Anyway, so he says, like, hey, I'm working on myself. I want to be better for you. And she says, I'm coming home with you. And then she says, like, I'm ready to do the work, to work on us. And then they ride off into the Stonehaven-y sunset together. And that is the end.
Yeah. I really liked the ending. I liked that it wrapped up. Like, if you only read this one book, you had a full story. Everything tied up neatly in a bow. There's no cliffhangers that you're like, oh, I need the next book. Like, it's very well done.
I really enjoy going back and looking at this book again, because I'm not going to lie, I haven't actually read this book in quite a while.
Yeah.
So the decision for us to read it and like have a look back through it and sort of look at it from a new sort of a modern lens, even though the book is like 20 years old, I think it was a really interesting read this time around.
Yes, I'll agree with that. Yeah.
But yeah, we hope you enjoyed listening to us talk about Bitten, and if you continue on with the series, like, let us know and tweet us or Instagram us or
send us
whatever,
an email
and let us
or a message. Yeah,
and let us know what you thought of any of the books.
So yeah, that wraps it up for this week. Like we said, if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in this episode, anything about any of the other books in this series, any book suggestions, you can email us at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com. And be sure to check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Coffee and Co Read.
So next week we'll be reading a new book, and it's gonna be one of Catherine's favorites, another Sarah J. Maas book. We're gonna read the first in the Throne of Glass series, also called Throne of Glass. So we are starting with chapters 1 to 10. So make sure you follow along. And if you're enjoying our little chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you find content. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll see you on the next page.